Eliza Orzeszkowa, The Argonauts. Click the bell to get notifications about new videos. Chapter 15. In that rosy lamplight, Miss Mary seemed full of care. Under her smooth hair, her forehead was smooth and calm, but in her thoughtful eyes, and in the way that her head rested on her hand, anxiety was evident. Conscientiously devoted to the duties undertaken by her, she retained the warmth and purity which permeated the house of an Anglican pastor. Chance had committed to her care, in a strange atmosphere, a rare spirit, one of those which come to the world in the form of a flame. Even 3 years earlier, Kara had seemed to her, at first glance, one of those souls for whom life is love, worship, trust, and nothing more. No ambitions or imaginings beyond those. All her thoughts and wishes issued from her heart and went back to it. Her innate sensitiveness was inexplicable in its source, just as genius is in other persons. Sensitiveness in her demanded the accomplishment of her wishes as imperiously as, in organisms of another sort, hunger claims satisfaction for the body. She was by nature a flame and a bird. The riddle of her existence was involved in 2 words, to blaze and to fly. Besides, she had impulse and caprice. She loved to twitter and to laugh quietly in a corner. From the thoughtfulness into which she dropped oftener and oftener, she woke up as a gladsome and petted child. That room was filled with her quick speech, her thin voice, her gestures, almost theatrical, her laughing, her humming, and at times all the drawing rooms were filled with them. This day she woke up full of twittering, and before dressing threw her bare arms around Miss Mary, looking into her eyes, declaiming verses, telling childish dreams. "Why are you so delighted?" inquired Miss Mary. "Is it at the coming ball?" Kara pouted her scarlet lips contemptuously, and answered, "The ball. What do I care? I do not want the ball. Mamma and Ira do not want it either, so I will go today and beg father to defer it. But I am delighted this morning. The sun is so pleasant. Do you see how the rays quiver, how they slip among the leaves like little snakes, or spring like golden butterflies?" With outstretched finger she showed the play of sun rays among the clumps of green at the windows, herself in white muslin which covered her slender neck and childish breast, and with naked arms she might remind one of a butterfly escaping from the chrysalis of childhood. In the evening of that day, Kara circled about the room, her mouth filled with historical names and lines of poetry with which she had been occupied all day. Finally she caught Puffy in her arms, and courtesying so low before Miss Mary that she touched the floor, announced that she was going to her father. From time immemorial she had not talked with him a moment. Sometimes he was going out, or had not the time. But today she would watch him. She would wait till all his business was finished, all his guests gone. She would seize her father and bring him to her mother's study. Miss Mary would go there. Perhaps Marian would be there too. Her idyllic heart, like a bird in a grove, was eternally dreaming of quiet retreats, of confidential talks, of the attachment of hearts and the pressure of hands. Her picture of the Anglican rectory, taken from Miss Mary's narrative and situated in a grove of old oaks, smiled at her like a bit of paradise. But Mamma's study is so quiet and full of fragrant flowers. An hour had passed since she had skipped away with Puffy in her arms, and with the reflection of a bit of paradise in her eyes. Miss Mary felt alarmed. For some time she had felt continual alarm. She observed carefully the change taking place in Kara's disposition, and discovered in it causes for anxiety. But she could do nothing. While she was friendly to the family to which fate had brought her, and while she experienced from it kindness mingled with respect, it was to her a stranger. She observed everything and said nothing. She strove, more and more, to be inseparable from Kara, and to turn her attention toward things of remote interest. That was a splendid mansion, but terrors were roaming around in its drawing rooms, among plushes, mirrors, damasks, satins, and gold. From the gates of the mansion, the rumble of a carriage went forth, grew faint in the street, and was lost in the distance. The master of the mansion was in that carriage which sank in the uproar of the city, to return, barely, at daybreak. A quarter of an hour passed. Kara did not return. Maybe she went to her mother? Another quarter of an hour. Miss Mary rose up, took a small candlestick in her hand with a candle, which she lighted to use in her wandering through the series of drawing rooms. but among the soft folds of cretonne and muslin, the lofty door, ornamented with gilded arabesques and borders, opened slowly, and Kara walked into the chamber holding Puffy at her bosom. Her face was so bent that the lower part of it was hidden in the silky coat of the little animal. Miss Mary, sitting down again, inquired, "Where were you, Kara, after your father went away? With Mamma?" In answer, a few steps from the door, the sound of a fall was heard. That was Puff. He had dropped from her arms to the floor. She had let him slip down along her dress. Kara had never treated her favorite with such indifference or so carelessly. Leaning forward, Miss Mary fixed her eyes on the young girl. "Oh, my God! What has happened?" "Who can tell, but something has happened, that is certain." Kara's cheeks, recalling usually the leaves of a full rose, were as white as the soft muslin covering her chamber, and her lips, always scarlet, formed a barely visible line, pale and narrow. Tall, slender, and erect, without the slightest movement of hand or head, with dry eyes looking somewhere into remoteness, she passed through the room, and with automatic movement dropped into a low chair near Miss Mary, who touched her hand and felt the cold of ice in it. "What is the matter, my dear? Are you ill?" Instead of giving an answer, Kara rose and went to the cluster of green plants at the window. With her shoulders turned toward Miss Mary, she seemed to be looking at the plants, but after a few minutes she turned and, making some steps, stopped, with her eyes fixed on the floor. "Kara, come to me!" cried Miss Mary. She went and sat down at her side. The English girl looked at her sharply and asked in a low voice, "Have you met anything disagreeable, or anyone, or has anyone?" She did not finish, for the delicate, pale face turned from her with quick movement and said very hurriedly, "No, no, no." Then the slender form of the girl slipped slowly from the chair to the carpet, and her head rested heavily on the knees of her governess. But barely had the soft hand of the English girl touched her hair, when Kara rose and went to the other side of the room, where the light screen, struck by her skirt, tottered and fell with a clatter. Without noticing the noise, Kara turned now toward the lamp, and with a face which was growing ever paler, she sat down opposite Miss Mary and opened one of the books lying on the table. Her brows were raised. This brought many wrinkles to her forehead. For a time it seemed as though she were reading, then she closed the book with a sudden gesture, stood up again, and went toward the door leading to the drawing rooms. "Are you going to your mamma?" She made no answer, but sat on a low stool near the door. Puff went up, and putting his forepaws on her knees, licked her hand. But that hand, usually so fondling, pushed the little dog far away with a sudden movement. Miss Mary rose and was going to the stool, but she had hardly reached the middle of the room when Kara rose again and went to meet her. The English girl seized both her hands. "My dear," began the governess, "you frighten me. What has happened? What is your trouble? You should have confidence in me. I am your friend and a friend of your family. Perhaps I can explain or help you in some way. Has anything happened? Has there been an accident? What is it that troubles you?" The dry, dark eyes of the girl, looking, as it were, from some distant depth, met the kindly glance of her friend, and this whisper came from her lips, "Nothing, nothing." Then, going some steps, she stopped at the table with the lamp on it, and again opened one of the books there. Miss Mary followed, put her arm around Kara, and wished to draw her near, but she, with an alarmed and supple movement, slipped from her embrace, put the book down, and turning, started to go somewhere. Miss Mary faced toward the door and said, "I will go for your mother." But that instant she was frightened, for Kara, recovering her voice at once, screamed, "No!" Her eyes grew wild, and she began to tremble. There was no doubt, in the row of empty drawing rooms which stretched beyond that door, ornamented with arabesques and gilded borders, the girl had seen some horror. But what the horror was, and whence it had crept forth, Miss Mary did not know. She sat down, and, pale with fear, placed her helpless hands upon her knees. What could she do in presence of those blue lips, which were as silent as if shut by some seal, either sacred or infernal? What could she do? Kara's father was not at home, and to call her mother, when the very mention of that mother brought a cry of terror from the girl's breast, would have been a useless cruelty. Her brother? Her elder sister? Miss Mary's hand moved in a manner indicating doubt. It was necessary to wait, to leave her some time to herself. She might grow calm, overcome her fear, speak. Left to herself, Kara went to the bed, knelt by it, and buried her face in the coverlet. But a few minutes later, she wound her lithe form like the twist of a serpent and turned her face toward the ceiling. She remained in this posture rather long, only changing, from time to time, the position of her head, which rested on the coverlet. Miss Mary remembered people seized with violent pains, who, in the fruitless hope of allaying them, changed positions and postures continually. She remembered also the faintness and weariness which cover the faces of people with pallor and an expression of unbearable disgust. A certain disgust, repulsive and unendurable, must be working in that slender breast, from which a low moan came when she turned her head from side to side. "Are you ill, dearest Kara? Are you in pain?" From the bed, in a scarcely audible whisper, came, "No." She rose, went to Miss Mary, sat on the carpet, put her head on the English girl's knee, with her face toward the ceiling. She threw her hands back on her disheveled hair, and then let them drop without control, so that they fell on the carpet as if lifeless. Her dry, inflamed eyes continued to look at the ceiling. Miss Mary, bent and making her words as low and fondling as human words could be, inquired again, "Has anything happened? Has anything hurt you?" Changing the position of her head and shaking it as if she wished to shake something off, she whispered, "Nothing." And rising, she went again to the end of the room. Her hair, not long but thick, like a bundle of silken flax, lay motionless on her narrow shoulders. Her pendant hands seemed like two rosebuds falling from a bush. She stood again for a moment before the clump of green plants, then went around it and hid beyond the thickest palms at the window. Outside the window was the darkness of a winter evening, relieved somewhat by snow which covered the broad garden. The darkness was spotted by red lamps, which illuminated the street beyond the garden. Some months before, Kara had opened a window overlooking that same garden. She did this in the middle of the night, to look at the first snow and at the frost in the moonlight. Snow was lying there now, at the close of winter, surely the last snow. Much time passed. Miss Mary rose and went to the narrow space between the clump of plants and the window. Kara was standing there at the very window, looking into the darkness, or at the red spots made by lanterns placed here and there in it. The governess saw that a change had taken place in her. She was not pale as before. On the contrary, a lively flush had come out on her face. Her features were less rigid. Instead of the nauseous disgust and dull pain, an expression of deep thought had covered them. As happened often when Kara was thinking deeply, the point of her finger was in her mouth. Miss Mary felt relieved. Kara is no longer pale, thought she. She has stopped over something. She stands long in one place. She is recovering her balance. Soon she will be pacified completely and will tell what has happened. "Do you not wish me to read to you?" Kara shook her head and said in a low voice, "I want to sleep." "To sleep so early? But you are tired, of course." "Very well, dear. Lie down and rest. I will call Ludwika to open the bed. Or no, I will do it myself. No one need make a noise here that would prevent us from talking." With great goodness and kindly grace, while arranging the bed with a rustle of silk and the waves of lace going through her fingers, Miss Mary told vivaciously of many things which were near and confidential, things always affecting Kara. And though no answer came to her from beyond the green plants, her voice, which sounded agreeably, scattered the gloom and silence of the chamber. Half an hour later the door to the drawing-room was opened partly, and the voice of Irene said some words in English. Miss Mary went to the door on tiptoe. "Kara is sleeping already," whispered she. "We ought not to wake her. She is a little unwell." The door was closed slowly and in silence. Some minutes later the maid brought a tray in with tea and many dishes. Soon after Malvina entered the room. She approached her daughter's bed quietly and anxious. "What is the matter?" whispered she. "Why did she go to bed so early?" Miss Mary gave some pacifying answer. That was caution. She felt always in that house, and on that day more than ever, the need of caution in making observations. Both looked at the girl, who, as they thought, was sleeping soundly. She breathed slowly and evenly, with a deep flush on her cheeks. Malvina bent down and impressed a long kiss on the forehead of her sleeping daughter. Then Miss Mary noted something of which she was not sure. When her mother's lips rested on Kara's forehead, a quiver ran through the girl's body, from head to foot. But Miss Mary was not sure whether Kara really trembled, or it only seemed so to her. After Malvina's departure, she remained at the bedside, with eyes fixed on the delicate face, which was growing more inflamed with an ever-increasing flush. A number of dark spots came out on her purple lips, which were parched and half open. Her small pearl-like teeth gleamed behind them. "She is sick, but has fallen asleep," thought Miss Mary. "Perhaps that horror, which I thought seized the child in the empty drawing-rooms, was an invention of her mind? Surely it was nothing more. She is simply ill. Perhaps not very ill, since she fell asleep so quickly." The small night lamp shone in Kara's room like a blue spark. In the adjoining room, beyond the open door, far into the night, rustled book leaves turned by the English governess. Miss Mary watched long and stood often in the open door, between her room and Kara's, inclining forward, looking from a distance at the bed from which the regular, unbroken sound of breathing came to her. She is asleep. She moved a number of times and groaned, then again she was silent. Puff lay at her feet, like a bundle of ash-colored silk, and snored slightly. The street beyond the garden grew more and more silent, till it was silent altogether. At the windows light began to whiten the shades and to draw aside the black curtain of darkness which was on the furniture. The wearied Miss Mary, in a long dressing gown, ready to spring from her bed any moment, slept for a short time and then woke with a feeling of great fear. She was roused by a sharp cold, by a breath of frosty air coming in through the open door. She sprang up and ran, with a cry, to Kara's chamber. There, on the threshold, she saw beyond the spreading palm leaves the great window half open, and a slender white figure sitting there in the gray dawn. When had she done that? How long had she sat there with her shoulders resting on the window frame, with her naked feet hanging in the air, with her breast and arms stripped even of muslin? No one was ever to know. Miss Mary, while carrying the girl to bed with that strength which only terror can give one, felt in her embrace limbs as stiff as those of a frozen corpse. But her breast rose and fell with her breathing, which was heavy and audible. Her cheeks and forehead were burning. In half a minute the window was closed. Miss Mary, with all the strength of long and supple arms, strove to warm the breast and shoulders, which were as cold as ice, and the skin on them stiffened. "Oh, child, you unkind, most dear, poor child, why have you done this? Is it possible to do such things? Did you know what you were doing? Was that an unfortunate accident, or did you do it purposely? Tell, was it done purposely? Tell me, tell!" Kara for the first time looked straight into Miss Mary's face. She bent her head with a lively movement. Her eyes shot forth triumph. A smile encircled her parched lips. In the glitter of her eyes, in the smile, in the curve of her neck, for the twinkle of an eye, shone forth once again the willful, capricious Kara. Next moment her teeth began to chatter, and her whole body trembled in a feverish chill, so that the silk of the bed rustled loudly. With that rustling was joined a dry, unbroken cough, which shook the fragile and ice-cold breast, the skin of which was rough and had a tanned and withered look. Miss Mary sprang from her knees. On her lips were the words, "Her parents, a doctor. Remember to subscribe."